Welcome to Modern Crime Scope, a place where we uncover shocking true crime stories, hidden secrets, and real-life cases that reveal the darkest sides of ordinary lives. Emma Miller looked like the perfect suburban mom, but behind closed doors, she was secretly giving her children marijuana edibles and vape pens, turning their innocent snacks into a dangerous nightmare that shocked an entire community. In a quiet suburban neighborhood where rows of identical houses lined the streets, everything seemed normal on the surface. The lawns were trimmed, mailboxes decorated with seasonal themes, and children's laughter often echoed in the air as they played outside. To anyone passing by, the place was the picture of safety and comfort. Among these homes lived a young mother with 2 children, and to most people she appeared to be just like everyone else. She waved at neighbors, attended occasional school events, and never gave off the impression that anything was wrong. But behind the front door of her house, there were secrets no one suspected, secrets that would eventually shock the entire community. The mother had recently lost her job, a blow that left her financially strained and emotionally unstable. With each passing day, her stress grew heavier, and her sense of control began to slip. Packages arrived at her doorstep late at night, delivered quickly and discreetly. To neighbors, it seemed like simple online shopping. They assumed she was ordering clothes, groceries, or household items. In reality, what filled those boxes were things most people would never leave lying around children. She unsealed wrappers of brightly colored candies, brownies, and gummy packs, each infused with marijuana. Alongside them were sleek vape pens, shiny and harmless looking, easy to mistake for toys or gadgets. At first, the children showed no signs that anything was wrong, but slowly, subtle changes began to creep into their lives. They started waking up late, dragging their feet to school and struggling to stay focused in class. Teachers noticed their once bright eyes looked dull and unfocused. They stumbled through lessons, unable to concentrate, and their grades began to slip. What was once playful energy on the playground transformed into sluggishness. They fell asleep at odd times, sometimes in the middle of activities, leaving classmates and teachers puzzled. At home, the mother appeared unconcerned. She placed the infused candies in bowls like regular treats, leaving them on the table for the kids to grab whenever they wanted. She left vape pens on counters, disguised as colorful pens or simple devices. It was not clear whether she truly believed what she was doing was harmless or whether she was willfully ignoring the risks. To her, it became a routine, as ordinary as setting down a plate of cookies after school. But the effects were far from ordinary. The children's young bodies couldn't handle the powerful doses of THC hidden inside each piece of candy, and every passing week pulled them further away from the healthy, active lives they once knew. From the outside, the family still looked like any other. The house was neat, the children appeared clothed and fed, and the mother kept up her friendly demeanor. No one passing by could see the storm brewing inside, but the signs were there, faint and disturbing, waiting to be pieced together. Teachers whispered about changes in the children, neighbors noticed their pale faces, and relatives felt something was off when the kids seemed unusually quiet during visits. The warning signs were gathering like dark clouds, but the truth had not yet broken through. The first real signs that something was deeply wrong appeared when one of the children stumbled into the school nurse's office one morning. His eyes were red and glassy, his speech slurred, and his movements unsteady. At first, the nurse thought it might be the flu or exhaustion from staying up too late, but when she took his temperature, it was normal. There was no fever, no infection, no obvious explanation. She gave him water and suggested rest, but the strange behavior stayed with her. She noted it in her records and decided to keep a closer watch. Later that week, the younger child from the same family fell asleep at his desk, completely unresponsive to the teacher's attempts to wake him. His classmates laughed at first, assuming he was joking, but when his head hit the desk with a heavy thud, the room fell silent. He was eventually shaken awake, but his eyes were heavy, his words delayed, and his body sluggish. The teacher, alarmed, reported it to the principal, who added the concern to a growing list of unusual behavior. At home, the mother's routine became more careless. She ordered new edibles weekly, stocking her pantry with gummies and chocolates that looked almost identical to snacks sold in regular stores. She even baked cookies at times, mixing the marijuana into the batter. What made it worse was her casual attitude, leaving these items out in the open, as if they were no different from cereal or chips. The children, too young to recognize the danger, consumed them without question. They liked the sweet taste and had no idea their mother was feeding them substances that would alter their minds and bodies. The vape pens were even more deceptive. Brightly colored and slim, they resembled school supplies or tech gadgets, the kind of thing a child might pick up out of curiosity. As the weeks passed, the changes became harder to ignore. Both children grew pale, often with dark circles under their eyes. Their energy levels dropped, and their once active imaginations seemed dulled. On the playground, they no longer ran with the same enthusiasm. They stumbled in games, forgot rules, and withdrew from friends. Some classmates whispered that they were weird, while others simply avoided them. Teachers debated what might be wrong. Some assumed the children weren't sleeping well at home. Others suspected neglect, but no one dared suggest drugs. The idea seemed too far-fetched, especially for a mother who appeared polite and caring in public. The turning point came when a neighbor's daughter visited for a sleepover. She was given the same snacks as the mother's children, and later told her parents she had felt dizzy, lightheaded, and unable to think clearly after eating them. Her parents dismissed it at first, assuming she had too much sugar, but the memory lingered. They began to quietly pay attention to the family next door, watching for patterns they hadn't noticed before. What they saw unsettled them. The children looked dazed more often than not, their steps slow and uncertain, their laughter fading into silence. Still, the truth remained hidden, wrapped in bright packaging and disguised as love from the one person meant to protect them. The neighbor's daughter's complaint about feeling dizzy after eating snacks at the sleepover planted the first seed of suspicion outside the school. Her parents replayed the details in their minds, unsettled by the way she had described her body going numb, her head spinning, and her inability to stay awake afterward. At first, they told themselves it was probably nothing, maybe too much sugar or a stomach bug. But once they began paying closer attention, they noticed other things. The children next door seemed constantly tired, dragging their feet to the car in the mornings, their clothes sometimes wrinkled, their eyes dull. On afternoons, when kids gathered in the neighborhood to play, the mother's children often stood on the sidelines, disoriented, barely keeping up with the games. Whispers began to circulate quietly, whispers of something strange happening in that house. Inside the school, the situation was becoming more difficult to ignore. Teachers documented how the children fell asleep during lessons, missed assignments, and struggled with memory. One teacher wrote in her notes that the younger child forgot his own backpack 3 times in a single week. Another noted that the older sibling couldn't recall simple instructions only minutes after hearing them. The school nurse compared her earlier notes and realized the symptoms were repeating themselves. Though she raised the issue during a staff meeting, the staff hesitated to take action. To accuse a parent of exposing children to drugs seemed unthinkable. Most assumed the family must be going through stress at home, perhaps financial struggles, or even emotional neglect. The real explanation felt too extreme. At home, however, the situation worsened. The mother had grown careless, and in her mind, what she was doing had already become normal. Bowls of gummies sat on the counter. Brownies were cooling on trays, and colorful wrappers that looked like regular candy bars filled the cupboards. Vape pens were scattered across tables, some half-used, others still sealed in plastic. The children, accustomed to this routine, no longer questioned what they were given. They reached for gummies without hesitation, puffed from vape pens out of curiosity, and accepted the haze that followed as just another part of life. Their young minds couldn't understand that their bodies were being poisoned a little more each day. The turning point for the community came when a classmate told her parents. She didn't want to sit near one of the children anymore because he always smelled strange. She couldn't describe it clearly, only that it reminded her of smoke. This revelation spread quickly among parents who began to share their concerns privately. The dizziness reported by the sleepover guest, the odd smell, the constant fatigue, all the pieces were beginning to form a troubling picture. Still, no one dared confront the mother directly. She was often seen waving cheerfully, dropping her kids off with a smile as if nothing were wrong. That mask of normalcy kept the truth shielded just a little longer. Behind closed doors, however, the walls were closing in. The children's health was deteriorating more noticeably, their once lively personalities dulled by constant exposure. They no longer laughed the way they used to, their voices often quiet, their movements clumsy. The neighborhood was beginning to sense that something terrible was hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moment when it could no longer be ignored. The breaking point arrived on a stormy evening when rain pounded against the windows and thunder rattled the walls of the small house. One of the children had been unusually lethargic all day, barely eating, barely speaking. By nightfall, his condition worsened. He collapsed onto the floor, his body limp, his breathing shallow. Panic filled the house as the mother grabbed her phone and dialed emergency services. When paramedics arrived, they rushed the child into the ambulance, their faces tight with concern. At the hospital, doctors moved quickly, running tests to find the cause of the sudden collapse. What they discovered shocked everyone in the room. The child's blood contained high levels of THC, a chemical compound found in marijuana. For a patient so young, the levels were dangerously high, almost life-threatening. The hospital staff immediately notified law enforcement as the results raised red flags of child endangerment. Investigators began asking questions, carefully piecing together the story. The mother appeared anxious but tried to downplay the situation, suggesting maybe her child had accidentally consumed something without her knowledge. But the explanations didn't hold up under scrutiny. Police obtained a warrant to search the house, and what they uncovered painted a grim picture of months of neglect and recklessness. Inside the pantry, officers found bags of edibles in bright, colorful packaging that could easily be mistaken for regular candy. Boxes of gummies, cookies, and brownies filled with marijuana were stacked on the shelves. Vape pens, some used and others unopened, were discovered hidden in drawers, in purses, and even in plain sight on kitchen counters. Investigators noted how closely the packaging resembled harmless treats marketed to children. This was not a one-time mistake. It was a pattern, a dangerous environment where harmful substances were left out for young hands to grab. Neighbors were stunned as officers carried out boxes of evidence from the house late into the night. The flashing red and blue lights filled the street, drawing small crowds of onlookers. Parents who had once trusted the mother now watched in disbelief as the truth unfolded. Rumors that had quietly circulated suddenly became undeniable. The friendly woman they had waved to at school events and block parties was at the center of a shocking case of child endangerment. Meanwhile, the children remained in the hospital for observation. Doctors worked tirelessly to flush the substances from their systems, monitoring their recovery closely. Though stable, the damage was clear. Their small bodies had endured months of exposure, and while they were expected to recover physically, questions lingered about the long-term effects on their health and development. Social services stepped in immediately, determining that the children could not return to their mother's care. The case spread quickly through local media, sparking outrage and disbelief. Reporters camped outside the neighborhood, cameras rolling as details leaked. The story of a mother secretly giving her kids marijuana edibles and vape pens spread beyond the community, igniting debates about parenting, substance abuse, and hidden dangers inside seemingly normal homes. The investigation was far from over, but one thing had become certain. The perfect facade had been shattered, and the truth was darker than anyone could have imagined. The courtroom was silent when the case began. The weight of the charges heavy enough to draw reporters, curious neighbors and concerned parents into the gallery. The mother sat at the defense table, her head lowered, her face pale, no longer able to hide behind the smiling mask she had worn in her community. The prosecution wasted no time in presenting the evidence. Photographs of the seized edibles and vape pens were displayed for the jury, the bright colors of the packaging almost mocking in their childish appeal. Rows of gummies, brownies, and candies were laid out, each one looking harmless, yet carrying doses strong enough to overwhelm adults, let alone children. The jurors shifted uncomfortably as toxicology reports were read aloud, detailing the dangerously high THC levels in the children's blood. The most chilling moments came when teachers and medical professionals testified. Teachers described the decline in the children's performance, their sudden exhaustion, memory lapses, and strange behavior that had puzzled the staff for months. Doctors explained how the children's developing bodies had been repeatedly exposed to substances that could damage memory, coordination, and brain development. Neighbors recounted their suspicions, from the odd behavior at playtime to the complaints of dizziness from the sleepover guest. Each testimony painted a clearer picture. The danger had not come from strangers or accidents, but from the very person meant to protect them most. The defense attempted to argue that the mother had not intended harm, claiming she was overwhelmed, depressed, and using the substances herself to cope. They insisted that the children must have accessed the edibles accidentally, but the sheer amount of evidence made the argument difficult to believe. The vape pens scattered around the house, the candy bowls filled with infused gummies, the repeated purchases of marijuana products. It was too consistent, too deliberate to dismiss as carelessness. The jury listened, stone-faced as the mother's lawyer struggled to soften the damage. In the end, the verdict was clear. The mother was found guilty of multiple charges, including child endangerment, neglect, and reckless conduct. The judge, stern and unyielding, handed down a sentence that would keep her behind bars for years. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom as the reality settled in. She would no longer walk the quiet suburban streets where she had once seemed so ordinary. For the children, the road to recovery was slow and uncertain. They were placed in protective custody, eventually moving to live with relatives who offered a safer home. Therapy sessions became a regular part of their lives, helping them rebuild not only their health, but also their trust. Their school kept a careful watch, teachers giving extra attention to ensure they could regain the learning they had lost. Slowly, their laughter returned, though shadows of the past lingered. The neighborhood, once peaceful and unsuspecting, was left shaken. Parents who had once waved across driveways now held their children closer, reminded that danger does not always wear a threatening face. Sometimes it comes disguised as love, wrapped in the trust placed in a parent. The case became a story retold at school meetings, at neighborhood gatherings, and in living rooms late at night. A haunting reminder that evil can hide in the most ordinary of places, waiting until it can no longer be ignored.